is there are several issues facing the planet today that you can't get around. A thinking person would put energy on the list. I always put it as number one. If you figure out how to power the planet, this is what happens. You lose 6 of the problems facing the planet today. The fact that we've been able to provide the United States, this economy, with low-priced energy for the amount of time that we have, this industry ought to be very popular. Instead, it's not. The industry has made over $600 billion on the sale of gasoline. That's a lot of money. But in the same period of time, the federal government collected $1.3 trillion. I'm very glad to see the number of young faces here that have entered the industry. The industry has statistics that show us that it is an aging workforce and a workforce that is scheduled to retire, and we need to attract as many as possible. The first symposium we got involved with on this topic, how do we change the image of the industry, how do we combat this aging workforce and people leaving the business, was back in 2003. At the time, it was done in conjunction with GEMI, the Global Energy Management Institute at the University of Houston, and the host of that event is sitting right here, Lane Sloan. The goal was we had high school students, we had college students, we had industry executives, and we had industry professionals all talking about this issue. At that time, we didn't have a solution to it, but seeing the number of professionals that are in this club here in Houston, I think we're at least doing something, which I think is very good. One of the things that happened at that event was a gentleman named Dr. Smalley, who, if you don't know, he was a Nobel laureate at Rice University, and he came in to talk about, well, he was a Nobel laureate in nanotechnology. So I didn't see how that was going to relate to energy. But when he got up to give his talk, he made some very good points. And today I'd like to start there, and then we'll work backwards. But one of the things that he pointed out is there are several issues facing the planet today that you can't get around. A thinking person would put energy on the list. I always put it as number one. But number 2 was water. Number 3, food. We've got a lot of people we need to feed. Number 4 was the environment. And if anyone has seen all of the debate going on climate change, we can see how important that's become without a lot of information and a lot of facts to back up what we're doing. The next one was poverty, then terrorism and war, and we're all familiar with that one. Disease. Democracy. I always wondered about this one, whether he thought it was the spread of democracy or the lack of. But in his talk, he wasn't specific. And, of course, population. Going in, at that time, 2003, 6.3 billion people, to 2050 at 9 to 10 billion people, that's big. That's a lot of people. And then he pointed this out. If you figure out how to power the planet, this is what happens. You lose 6 of the problems facing the planet today. It doesn't solve democracy, but it does handle the water issues, because if you've got energy, you can make water. If you've got energy, you can grow food. If you've got energy and you've handled the water and the poverty, well, terrorism is in a good shape. With enough energy, you can deal with what we need to do with the environment. So energy actually represents one of the most important things, I would say the most important challenge facing the planet for the next 50 years. Now, you guys are in the energy industry. That makes you very important people. 10 years ago, when my wife and I, and Naomi's right over here, launched World Energy Magazine, I didn't know a lot about energy. I knew it was big, but I didn't know much else about it. Having been in publishing all my life, I was looking for what I call a reverse niche, something I could identify with a really big audience. Most niche publishers are going the other direction. They're looking for a way to get to a very small audience. Now that I've been in it for the last 10 years, I've interviewed some 500 and some odd CEOs, and if you look at our publication, it's entirely written by the CEOs. I got to admit, in this industry, you guys have got some of the coolest toys I have ever seen. There just isn't another industry out there where you are dealing with the level of technology that this industry deals with, where you're dealing with the challenges and the budgets. I mean, $1 million budgets just to get anything done. So to me, it's a very exciting industry. And it does have some challenges. I mean, I've been curious on the PR side why it's always kind of carried a dark hat. But in this industry, it's a group of heroes. But where does this stuff come from? You guys all know this, but I'm going to do it anyway. I mean, we know that oil comes from Saudi Arabia and the Middle East, Russia, my favorite, Venezuela. And a lot of people are not very happy with Mr. Chavez, but he makes great copy. So I like this guy. But the most important is on the demand side. We hear about China. We hear about India. It's in the paper all the time. But these are burgeoning markets, and they mean a lot. But this is the market where we really need to focus our attention. Because if we know anything about the United States, it is the largest consumers market in the world. Last time I looked, consumers had power. There's some good news. We're still the third largest producer of oil on the planet. Supply has been able to keep up with demand, and we can still buy enough oil on the market to supply our needs. There is some bad news that comes along with that. Domestic production in the United States has dropped on average by 1.25 for the past 17 years. I think it was back in 1985 we were almost 50-50 between domestic production and imported oil. Currently, we produce only 30% of our needs domestically. And if these trends continue, our domestic production could be less than 10% of our needs by 2012. And that's just watching these curves diverge. Now, with all of that in mind, and the fact that we've been able to provide the United States, this economy, with low-priced energy for the amount of time that we have, this industry ought to be very popular. Instead, it's not. Lane, I'm quoting you again from the TV show that you did on Sarbanes. As an industry, we should carry some weight with the public, but the industry oscillates its image from bad to worse and never gets much better. Why is that? I mean, here is one of the most important industries on the planet. Lots of exciting people in the business. I mean, some of the biggest characters I've ever met are in this business. What are the influences? You've got the price at the pump. That's obvious. We don't have much effect with that one. You've got profits. I never knew profits were a problem until I got into this business. Every other industry or business I've been in, when you talk about profits, that's a good thing. When you're in this business, that sends you in front of Congress. The environmental concerns. Now, these are very real. I mean, we do need to be cognizant of what we're doing to the environment. And then there's a lack of understanding. These are what I hear when I go and I visit with CEOs, and I talk to a lot of them. They bring up these issues again and again and again. One of the major influences that I see affecting this industry is this one: Hollywood. Now, when you start to think about that, what exactly is Hollywood doing? I mean, we have